The four horsemen of the apocalypse are not simply a biblical narrative. They are a fundamental archetype of human fear, and of the ancient, persistent recognition that civilization is far more fragile than it appears. First described in the 6th chapter of the Book of Revelation, these figures have spent 2,000 years transforming from religious symbols into universal cultural codes, appearing and reappearing in every era that has felt itself standing at the edge of something irreversible. To read them carefully is to hold up a mirror to the particular anxieties of whatever age is doing the reading. And what that mirror reflects is rarely comfortable. The first of the four is the most theologically contested. John's description is deceptively simple: I looked, and behold, a white horse. Its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering, and to conquer. No weapon is named beyond the bow. No blood is mentioned. The color white suggests purity, or its imitation. And this ambiguity has generated centuries of disagreement. The victorious gospel. Some of the earliest Christian theologians identified the White Horseman with Christ himself, or with the spread of Christianity through the world. The white horse, in this reading, carries not destruction but divine authority, a crown given, not seized. The Antichrist, a competing tradition, which eventually became dominant in medieval theology, argued that this rider is a deceiver, a false prophet who mimics righteousness in order to seduce nations. The bow strikes from a distance, invisibly, without the honest declaration of the sword. Pestilence. In the popular imagination of the 20th century, the White Horseman became most commonly associated with plague and epidemic disease. The invisible weapon that kills from a distance, the crown of suffering that passes from host to host, the image maps onto pandemic with unsettling precision. In a contemporary reading, the White Horseman is ideological conquest. Information warfare, soft power, cultural dominance, the kind of victory that precedes physical destruction precisely because it is not recognized as violence until it is too late. He wins before anyone realizes the battle has begun. And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. Where the first rider conquers, often bloodlessly, through persuasion or deception. The Red Horseman is the pure, undisguised fact of violence. His horse is the color of blood. His mandate is not organized warfare between states but something more disturbing, the condition in which people slay one another, civil war, communal massacre, the breakdown of the social fabric that ordinarily prevents neighbors from killing neighbors. This is not the violence of armies facing each other across a defined front. It is the violence of disintegration. Of a society turned against itself, consuming its own. In the nuclear age, the Red Horseman has not disappeared. He has simply changed scale. His sword has grown longer. His reach now extends to the stroke of a pen on a launch order, or to an algorithm that amplifies hatred across a billion screens until ordinary people find themselves capable of extraordinary cruelty. The mechanism is different. The horseman is the same. I looked, and behold, a black horse. And its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine. The black horseman is famine, but not simply the famine of failed harvests or drought. The scales in his hand point to something more precise and more insidious, the economics of scarcity, the controlled distribution of survival itself. The price described in the text is deliberately calibrated. A denarius was a day's wage for a laborer. A quart of wheat was a day's ration for one person. The arithmetic is simple and devastating: a man working a full day can feed himself, and nothing more. His family goes without. This is not the absence of food, it is the weaponization of food, the condition in which survival becomes a luxury available only to those who can afford it. And then the crucial detail. Do not harm the oil and wine. The luxury goods remain untouched. The olive oil and the vintage wine, markers of wealth in the ancient Mediterranean world, continue to flow freely for those who can afford them, while the poor measure out their grain by the spoonful. This is not a medieval image. It is a description of a pattern that has repeated across every century, including our own. In an era of global supply chain crises, food price manipulation, and the use of grain as a geopolitical weapon, the Black Horseman is perhaps the most recognizable of the four in contemporary headlines. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. The Greek word used in the original text, chloros, describes not simply paleness but the specific, sickly yellowish green of decomposing flesh. It is the color of things that were once alive and are no longer. Death alone among the four riders is named. He carries no weapon, because he needs none, he is the consequence of everything the first three have done. Death is entropy, not a cause but a result, not a process but an ending. He arrives when the others have finished their work. What follows him is Hades. Not hell in the sense of punishment, but the ancient Greek underworld as a repository, a place where the harvested souls are stored. Hades follows death the way a warehouse follows a harvest. The image is administrative in its cold precision, the four riders operate as a system, each one enabling the next, and death is simply the final step in the sequence. The detail that no one among the four controls or commands death, that he simply comes, that his name is given to him rather than chosen, is perhaps the most theologically significant element of the entire passage. The visual language of the Four Horsemen has proven to be one of the most generative and enduring in Western art. Albrecht Dürer, 1498, produced what remains the definitive image. His horsemen do not ride separately or sequentially, they charge together in a single overwhelming mass, a wall of divine destruction that literally tramples humanity beneath their hooves. The composition is suffocating, claustrophobic, and technically extraordinary. It established the visual template that almost every subsequent artist has either followed or deliberately broken. Viktor Vasnetsov, 1887, brought a different sensibility to the subject. His horsemen are more elemental, more atmospheric, they sweep across the canvas like a storm front, all movement and dark energy. Where Dürer's image is architectural, Vasnetsov's is meteorological. Cinema and literature have continuously deconstructed and reimagined the four figures. Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal placed death in direct conversation with a medieval knight, turning the apocalyptic into the existential. The zombie genre, from Romero to The Walking Dead, is essentially the Book of Revelation rewritten for a secular age, with the same four forces operating under different names. Perhaps the most brilliant modern reinterpretation appears in Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman's Good Omens, where the horsemen have become thoroughly contemporary. Famine is the owner of a fast food empire and a chain of diet book publishers simultaneously. Pollution has replaced pestilence following the invention of penicillin. War is a foreign correspondent who goes wherever conflict breaks out and makes it worse. The joke is precise because the observation is precise. The psychological function of the Four Horsemen is worth examining honestly, because it is not simply fear that keeps this image alive across 2 millennia. Human beings find it almost unbearable to believe that catastrophe is random. The idea that civilizations collapse for no coherent reason, that empires fall through accumulated accident rather than through any identifiable logic, is more terrifying than any specific threat. The Book of Revelation, whatever its theological claims, offers something that secular modernity struggles to provide, the assurance that even the worst events are part of a structure, that chaos has a shape, that the end, if it comes, will have been meaningful. The four riders are also, read carefully, a taxonomy of human failure rather than divine punishment. Each one corresponds to a specific moral failure at scale. Pride generates the conqueror. The belief that one civilization, ideology, or person has the right to impose itself on all others. Wrath releases war, the willingness to destroy what one cannot control. Greed produces famine, the organization of scarcity to concentrate power in the hands of the few. The abandonment of what genuinely matters brings death, not as punishment, but as the natural consequence of the preceding three. Today we see them in climate catastrophe, in the weaponization of artificial intelligence, in the deliberate manufacture of food insecurity as a tool of geopolitical leverage. They have stopped being mystical figures in the heavens. They walk among us now, dressed in business suits or hidden inside lines of code. They attend conferences. They sign legislation. They optimize supply chains. The Four Horsemen are a warning that does not age, because the conditions that summon them do not change. They are not waiting for a divine signal. They are not held back by prophecy or prayer alone. They are held back, when they are held back, by the ordinary, difficult, unglamorous work of human beings choosing, repeatedly and against their worst instincts, to build rather than destroy, to share rather than hoard, to speak honestly rather than manipulate. Every era that has faced genuine civilizational crisis has heard hoofbeats. The question every such era has had to answer is the same. Are these sounds approaching, or receding? That answer has never been given to us. It has always been made by us. As long as humanity has not learned to restrain its aggression and its greed, those hoofbeats will continue to sound in the distance, a reminder that every civilization is a temporary structure built on the shifting sands of history, and that its continuation is never guaranteed, only chosen.